Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the American Songster Radio Podcast, and I'm your host, Dom Flemings, the American Songster. And this one is the podcast for Season 4, Episode 3, on my latest single, It's Cold Inside, which comes from the album Traveling Wildfire, which is coming out in Smithsonian Folkways on March 24th. I'm sitting here in conversation with my wife and co-producer, Vania, and, what do you think, Vania? What sort of things should we talk about when it comes to It's Cold Inside?
Well, there's a lot to talk about. And, one of the main things I want to start with is just the idea that country music brings up so many different types of not only styles, but themes within the context of lyrics. And I feel like It's Cold Inside really fits into a similar vein where you have country songs about love, you have it about marriage and family and the home place and sort of this nostalgic idea of the past. But there are also a ton of songs, old and new, that really talk about hardships and struggling and, issues related to divorce and, your life falling apart. And so you've done a lot of different types of country and root styles that fit into, country love songs. But this one, It's Cold Inside, is a little bit darker, not in a scary way, but in the way that it goes beyond the surface and it really talks about some of the issues that you've been dealing with in your life. But it can also be very relatable because many people have experienced sort of these ups and downs, and It's Cold Inside really reaches beyond just some of the simple issues that can come up in your life, but it goes to moments where you hit rock bottom. And so that's what I really appreciate the song. But, you wrote it. So let's talk about the inspiration behind the song.
Well, I'll break it down by the verses in one form or another, because I was in a spot where I had a lot of my professional career, like, sort of unraveling in front of me, as well as a lot of things in my personal life were sort of falling apart in front of me. And I wanted to start with what happened to my home. It broke up and it blowed away. That's one thing, almost like, because all of those things that I thought were the most important parts of my life just ended up being sort of fleeting, and they disappeared at the first moment that I turned away from them. And so that was one way that it started. There's also, I was going through a divorce at that time too. So when I have, did you ever have a dream that you thought would never die? That was sort of an image that I had in my mind of, when you get married, you don't expect it to end. And so when it did end, that was a really, really hard thing for me to have to take on. So trying not to get caught up in the pits of despair, I looked at my environment around me. At that time, I was living in just a little apartment in North Carolina. And across the way from my apartment, there was a little bird. It was a goose that had broken its wing. So it was walking around with a broken wing, and the rest of the pack had actually left it behind during the winter time. And so I saw this bird scavenge and salvage its way through life for 2 whole winter seasons before I didn't see it ever again. So I just thought about that resilience. And that's why there's a bird that's singing a song in the distance. Because I've felt that way before. I felt isolated and separated from people before. And I just wanted to convey that in a little lyric. And so when I did that, that's how It's Cold Inside began to grow.
Well, with that specific song and then also the rest of the album, it's very, very, very personal. And I know a lot of artists say, oh, this is my most personable album. But really for you, it is. You haven't really talked a lot about your past in your music, especially because you interpret a lot of songs too. So you spend a lot of time researching and digging into the archives and understanding different regional styles, and then you bring that into your music. But what makes this new album, Traveling Wildfire, and It's Cold Inside so special is that you take the moment to, share that intimate side of you that a lot of people haven't seen before. When I met you, you had been, living on your own, and you had left the Carolina Chocolate Drops about 2 years before I had even met you. So you were at this spot where you were in a huge state of transition, and you weren't quite sure where things were going to go, and that happens, and I've been there too, where I've had to leave my career behind and start over again. And so It's Cold Inside not only talks about sort of the emotional despair that one can feel when they lose a relationship or lose someone that they love, but it also talks about big life transitions and how that can affect your self-esteem, how that can affect the direction that you're going on, and how that can give you, a lot of stress that creatively, you can use your imagination to sort of bring all the pieces together. But there are a lot of intense moments that happen in people's lives, and I'm so glad that you were able to share this side of you so that people can understand, like, there's more layers to the American songster than what meets the eye.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I put this show together the way I did. I picked a lot of songs that just sort of reach deep into very difficult situations. Sometimes they're one-on-one. It's between one person to another, like a song like Opportunity to Cry or Desperate Lover. You sort of have people talking about a single individual. But you have other songs like the Gambling Ballroom Blues by Jimmy Rogers, or also a song like Who Killed Poor Robin by the New Lost City Ramblers, that talk about sort of like broad palettes for an environment in which a dark moment can be assessed. And so for me, that's what I really wanted to reach into. I wanted to grab some very different sounds. And then there are some ones that are just songs that pull at the heartstrings, like Lonely Avenue by Ray Charles, and also songs like The Voice of the Blues by Irene Scruggs, where she is in such despair that she can't even tell what this disembodied voice is saying to her, because she knows it's not her father, her mother, her brother, or her lover who's died 1 year previously, but it's the voice of the blues that is just terrorizing her everywhere she goes. And so that's how I wanted to put this playlist together, because sometimes it's cathartic just to think about those darker times and those darker moments, and to be able to look at them head on. You can sometimes transcend past them when you've seen them just straight ahead. And so that's the one thing I want to do with this episode. And with It's Cold Inside, it does that as well. It resolves itself because, of course, the narrator says that they are reading the well wishes and the letters that they've gotten in the mail, and then they're building a fire with them to keep them from the cold. And so in a certain way, there's a warmth and there's a sort of transcendence that happens when one is in the pits of darkness in their life. And so that's a little bit of how I ended up writing the song.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about how many musicians now, and then also over the past, decades and decades, that have not only struggled with mental health issues, but unfortunately, their lives ended because of it. And I feel like this song also sort of pays tribute to not only the people who have survived and sort of lived to tell the tale, whether they've had issues related to, devastation in earthquakes or tornadoes, or have, lost loved ones, or people who have lost their lives to unfortunate situations. Like, this song is extending an olive branch to people that we know in our own lives, friends of ours, people from our past, family members, or people who we've never met that have had difficulties in their lives. And, the hope is that people can listen to this song and say like, wow, like Dom gets me. He gets it. He's been there, he's lived it, he's experienced trials and tribulations, and the music is what is the therapy that keeps him going. And also just, being someone who can take all of this creative expression and put it together in a way that's, tells a story from beginning to end, I think is a very powerful message out there. And it's actually a positive way to sort of spin the song, I think.
Absolutely. And when it came to recording the song in the studio, at first I had the lyrics written out for the song, but then I decided to start putting some chords to it. And I thought back on an old Carl Sandburg record I was listening to, and I got to thinking about the chords he tended to use on a lot of his recordings. And so I sort of tapped into that flavor at first. And then when we were in the studio in Los Angeles with Ted, I decided that I wanted to add some electric guitar with my acoustic guitar and kind of get a sound sort of like the very early Leonard Cohen albums, like the very first album he did, Songs of Leonard Cohen. I wanted to get a little bit of that sort of flavor. And so when we got into the studio, we cut a regular guitar track with my acoustic guitar, and then I went back over it and I played some electric guitar on the background as well. And so that sort of made for a real nice juxtaposition of sounds, of that nice warm tone of the acoustic guitar with the sort of really sort of flashy and very fiery and aggressive sound of the Hofner guitar. And so we sort of built it on that. And then, of course, there was Mark Orell playing the famous Billhorn Brothers Type O folding organ, which is a World War I organ that folds from a suitcase into its own little organ. And I guess back in World War I, it was one of the ways that the troops could sing hymns by bringing this organ out. And so we had a little bit of that organ on there. And then right toward the end, we had one final overdub of Tubular Bells being done by Mark Orell also, which gives an extra sinister sort of sound on some of those chord changes.
Well, the album is coming out in just a few days, which is super exciting. And I just remember you in the studio with Ted Hutt, and you all put together just all these amazing, beautiful elements to each individual song, and they all sound so different. You're not going to hear anything that you've heard before from Dom. So gear up, folks. It's a different flavor, different vibe, different energy. And from beginning to end, everything tells a story. So there's a story throughout each of the songs, and you really get a chance to see not only the ups and downs of Dom's storytelling in the way that it talks about some of the challenges that he's experienced, but then there's also these high moments too, where you get to see the good times, the moments of celebration, and all the positivity and lots of good energy too. So it's not all focused on one sort of theme, but there's a lot of different pops of color throughout the album. So I'm really excited about that. And what else can they expect, Dom?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the album, I mean, I'd like to just let them have a surprise with the album so they can dig into it that way. But for now, let's veer back toward the episode and veer back toward the playlist that I put together for the episode. When I think of a song like Hello in There by John Prine, it's a song that pulls so hard at the heartstrings that it's almost painful to get through the whole song, just because everybody knows what it's like to feel lonely or alone or left behind. But one of the things that John Prine does is that he really opens up the story to old people who are elders in the community who have gone far beyond their most active parts of their lives, and just talks about the observations and struggles that, in the case of Hello in There, a married couple has, trying to, rebuild their life when everything they've known has been gone and has continued to be gone. And it even implies at the end that if you see some ancient eyes, don't just pass them by. Say hello in there, hello. And that's such a wonderful, wonderful sentiment. And then on the other side of it, we have Last Night from Paul Butterfield Blues Band, originally a Little Walter number, but that notion of last night I lost the best friend I ever had. And it even dovetails into Taj Mahal's song, Desperate Lover. How do you feel when your baby's gone? And how can you sleep when you have no one to keep you warm? And so just those sort of ideas of being able to know what love is, know what contentment is, and then to see that contentment go away and to see that love go away from your life. And there are so many different songs that you can write about on this subject. And so I decided to do my bit and my part with It's Cold Inside.
Yeah, well, not only did you write, this amazing song, but you also created a really beautiful music video to go along with it. So for folks who are listening out there in the universe, make sure to check out It's Cold Inside, the music video, which was produced by Weird Life Films, and they're based out of Chicago. And the actual music video itself was filmed in Chicago. And that was really an interesting time because it was in the middle of January, this past January, and it literally was freezing cold outside. And we filmed, the song all throughout the city in various locations, including River North Pier, and then also the Pullman Porter National Museum down on the south side of Chicago. And then also we went over to Marquette Park in Gary, Indiana, and then finished out over at Berwyn, Illinois, over at Fitzgerald's nightclub. And and also the South Shore Cultural Center. I don't want to forget that one. That's also an iconic location. But yeah, the It's Cold Inside music video really adds some of these really great visual elements, not only of Chicago, but I feel like it really captures you in a very stoic environment. And literally, it was cold outside. So I felt like we got
freezing.
the It's Cold Inside flavor while making the music video.
Yeah, when you see me sitting on the pier, it is definitely cold outside when when I'm sitting there. I was freezing in that cold weather, but it was worth it to get that amazing shot of the skyline that we were able to get there. And then, of course, Fitzgerald's is a favorite club of mine, so I was so glad that they allowed me to bring the crew in and film. And yeah, it turned out really wonderful. My very first conceptual album that I've put out there, and I just think it was just wonderful to get a chance to see the song come to life in a brand new way. Because most of the time when I'm doing my work, I'm thinking about the audio or I'm thinking about the visual of the album itself, but rarely do I ever think about the visual on a music video that goes outside of just a live performance setting. So I was really pleased to be able to step into this new territory with It's Cold Inside, and also to see the song take shape in a different light when it comes to its visual. I really appreciated seeing that. So I hope folks will check it out and really enjoy the music video.
Yeah, and the first line in the song is bitter cold is the morning, holding hands with the night. Brain is burning with memories of half remembered dreams. It's cold inside. And just this feeling of bitter cold is the morning, holding hands with the night. It's not just about literally the transition of night and day, but it really, just holding hands, like this idea of like there could be a better day tomorrow, but the nighttime is bringing something more intense, and sort of just this idea of like waiting for your life to change over and waiting for the good times to happen. That's what I interpret.
Well, also, that's one of the things that when I was thinking about it, just the metaphor of holding hands can be a very intimate sort of activity where just holding somebody's hand can give them reassurance. It can give them love. It can give them stability in many different types of ways. And so the idea of the bitter cold, which is bitter, so that doesn't seem like a happy cold. So the bitter cold is the morning holding hands with the night, because a lot of times if you've stayed up all night, you can feel that cold weather, uh, on your face as the sun's going up, especially if you live in like a town like we're in Chicago now, but I lived in New York for a while, and same type of thing. You can have just a bitter cold in the morning, and that is how I wanted to transition into the idea of with the brain burning with the half remembered dreams, is because it's such a comforting image to think of one day going into the next. But when you have anxiety and you have dreams that'll keep you up all night, it's a sort of thing that will just it can tear you down.
Yeah, it can haunt you. This idea of brain is burning with memories of half remembered dreams. To me, I interpret that as, there are moments in your life that you remember and they're very clear, right? Whether it's a traumatic situation, a happy situation, or a situation where you failed, right? And, but then this idea of like burning memories of half remembered dreams. So then there's other sides that we suppress.
Yeah.
There's memories and dreams that we choose not to remember, or we only remember bits and pieces of it. And, we almost withhold that from ourselves as a way to protect ourselves from not remembering the full truth, or choosing to be emotionally disconnected to something that happens in our past. And that's why I love that line so much, because, I feel like that happens to me all the time,
And then of course that's why it leads into the fourth and final verse, which is, I need some reassurance as I'm stumbling down the foggy road. And see, the idea of stumbling down a road almost implies that it's nighttime again. And just one of the things that I tried to put into the writing is that, everybody needs some reassurance at some point. So you're stumbling down this foggy road, and all the notes and well wishes are fine, but they're too late to help me now. It's kind of the person's being reassured while they're not being reassured, but the reassurance is its own sort of it's its own detriment, and it's its own stressful burden that is laid upon the narrator, so that now all they can do is, you just have to imagine there's an overflow of goodwill and well wishes.
Well, is the song about a dream, or is it about your life visualizing a dream? And I know that sounds a little bit like,
well, it can be a little bit of both. That's part of the thing that's beautiful about songwriting, and it's part of why I wrote the song the way I did, is I wanted it to be ambiguous if you were awake or if you were in a dream. And then also I wanted to make sure that it was a bit ambiguous about if there is a resolution or if there isn't a resolution in the song, because the narrator of the song is now building a fire to keep warm, but is that fire enough, or is it
an imaginary fire in your soul, right? Because if all these well wishes are fine, but it's too late to help me now, it's this idea that there's a light inside of us that gets brighter, and then there's a light in us that can get darker. And when you have good things happen to you in life, creativity, inspiration, epiphanies, love, happiness, joy, friendships, all of that, your light gets bigger and brighter. But that fire inside of you that creates this beautiful big light can slowly get dimmer and dimmer if life gets so hard. If life really turns for the worse and unexpected things happen, or situations out of your control happen, it's like that fire can keep you from the cold, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot of, mindfulness, and takes a lot of well wishes to keep that inspiration and that fire going inside of you. And that's what I took from the line.
Well, that's a part of the reason why I had a song like "The House Where Nobody Lives" by Tom Waits on the mix, because what's so interesting about that song is it's about a fellow that is standing in front of an abandoned house, and he's wondering what happened to the people who lived in the house, because he finds out, and he tells the audience, he says, well, you find out that a house is just made of wood, because without love it's just a house where nobody lives. And of course the chorus, which I've always loved, is, once it held laughter and once it held dreams, did they throw it away? Did they know what it means? Did someone's heart break, or did someone do somebody wrong? There's so much in a chorus like that. And that's what I wanted to have with It's Cold Inside, because sometimes in writing, not telling people what exactly you're talking about can be the strength, compared to just saying, oh, well, I had a hard time, and
yeah, like being so literal,
so literal,
yeah, about your experience.
Yeah, sometimes being very literal can sort of lessen the effect of the writing. And so It's Cold Inside is one like that, or like a song like Who Killed Poor Robin. The one thing they don't tell you in that song is, was Poor Robin a good person, or was Poor Robin a bad person? They don't spend time with that. They just know that there's a procession of all these different people who know their particular role in the funerary rites of Poor Robin, and they all are willing to volunteer their time because it's the thing to do for Poor Robin. So, I don't know if he's a member of the aristocracy or if he's more of a common person, but he has this environment of people who are going to do the funerary rites for him. And so that's something that I tried to put a little bit into It's Cold Inside, just because it touches between that moment when the day ends and the night begins, and also that time when the sun begins to rise right at the end of the night. But yeah. I think that's all that we've got the time for this time in the podcast. But we could probably talk about this all day long.
Absolutely. Well, thankfully, we do talk a lot about this. We're always digging into these deeper conversations, which is the reason why we're so glad that you all joined us today on the podcast version of the episode of It's Cold Inside. And when you get a chance, make sure to check out the music video. And then also, the new album, Traveling Wildfire, is gearing up to be released on March 24th. And so make sure to check that out as well. There's a lot of great songs on there, a lot of different flavors. And also, there's going to be an LP released in the near future too. So for all of you vinyl record collection fans, collectors out there in the universe, make sure to grab a copy of the LP when you get an opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds good. Well, I think with that, we're going to just end out the episode. And thank you again for joining us on the American Songster Radio on WSM in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm your host, Dom Flemons, the American Songster, with my co-host, Vania Kennard. Thanks so much for being on the episode with me, Vania.
Oh, it's always so much fun hanging out with you and talking about music all day long.
Awesome. Well, that sounds good. Well, folks, we'll catch you next time. And if you ever think about it, please send some of your heartbreaking songs down. We'd love to play them on the radio show. So keep those heartbreakers and those weepers and those grim reapers right with you. All right. So here we go, folks. We're signing off now.
Bye-bye.